meeting of the regular monthly meeting of the Board of School Directors, please come to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Baez.
Here.
Director Herndon.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Present.
Director Peterson.
Present.
Director Phillips. Director Seamson.
Present.
Director Taylor.
Present.
Director Woodward. Here. President Miller.
Here.
We have 8 present.
I'm now asking the Secretary to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and ask that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start the meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation of Spanish-speaking, for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas noches. Si requiere servicio de interpretación en español, déjemelo saber levantando la mano. Buenas noches. Good evening. My name is Judith, Spanish interpreter. If you need interpretation services in Spanish, please let me know by raising your hand. Thank you. Gracias.
Before we move to our agenda, I would like to share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of some of our fellow teachers and representatives of the district and others. First is Darrett Johnson, a teacher at La Follette School who passed away June 16th, 2019. James Smallin Sr., a former MPS coach who passed away June 18th, 2019. Nizir Watts, a student at Townsend Street Elementary School who passed away June 18th, 2019. Claire Moore, a retired MPS principal who passed away June 21st. I'd also like to pay tribute to Oscar Alberto Martinez Ramirez and his daughter, Valeria Martinez Avalos, who suffered a human rights injustice at our border attempting to cross the Rio Grande, and he and his daughter lost their lives in this past week. So if we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. As this is the regular monthly meeting of the board in accordance with board rules, the board will not be taking any public testimony or any items during tonight's meeting. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, board members, or the administration, are to be directed to the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. Please be respectful of the democratic process adhered to by the board. Each month, we provide time for public input. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone persisting in disrupting this process will be asked to leave or will be escorted from the meeting and not allowed to return. Also, no one other than members of the board, the staff of the superintendent's office, the Office of Board Governance, and the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. For our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda and attachment online, you may do so by visiting esb.milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Now, let's begin. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first item of business on tonight's agenda is action on the minutes of the April 2019 organizational meeting and the minutes of the May 2019 special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Do any members of the board have corrections for the April 19th organizational meeting and the minutes of the May 29th special and regular meetings? There being no corrections, the minutes are approved as printed. If there are no objections from the board, the minutes are approved as amended. I'm not seeing any objections. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have 2 communications from the superintendent. The first is the monthly report of the superintendent of schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Superintendent Posley, do you wish to comment?
Yes, good evening, President Miller and members of the board. Keith Mosley, Superintendent of Schools. I'm pleased to share my monthly report as there are so many positive things to share about our students and our schools. June 13th was the last student day for school on the traditional calendar. We officially completed the 2018-19 school year with much to be proud of. I would like to share appreciation for our school leaders, our staff, our students, and our families for their many contributions during the school year. Their efforts are the reasons that we ended on such a positive note with many accomplishments to celebrate as we conclude the year. We gathered at Congress School to welcome students, staff, and families to the June Summer Academy First Day opening. A group that we are so grateful for are our community partners supporting our schools. To show our appreciation, we hosted a breakfast this month to show our gratitude and thank them. Please see the full list of those partners in my full report. There was a kickoff event at Mitchell International Airport for 35 of our students representing 9 schools were welcomed into our summer internship as a part of the Aviation Careers Education, or the ACE program. Congratulations to our track and field student athletes who qualified for and placed in their events at the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association track and field competition held at UW La Crosse. And congratulations to it's also in order to our Burdick students who earned as highest honors level as a part of the 2018-19 Word Master Challenge. At this time, we have truly shared the best for last. In our efforts to continue to increase opportunities for student voice, we're welcoming students who participated in our Student Summit during the 2018-19 school year to share a presentation and talk with us about their experiences, as well as some of the recommendations that they would like to make. At this time, I would like to welcome the students, as well as Mr. Boswell and Mr. Jagman, who's here with us. And at this time, Mr. Boswell, take it away.
All right. Mr. Boswell, 1 second, please. I just want to note that Director Phillips has joined us.
So noted.
All right, Mr. Boswell, it's yours.
All right.
All yours.
All right. So good evening, President Miller, members of the board. My name is Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of the Department of Student Services. Today, we are honored to have 4 of our MPS students here to talk about recommendations that were made during our Student Leadership Summit for the 2019-2020 school year. Attached to this items for your viewing pleasure at a later date is a PowerPoint presentation of recommendations. Additionally, we will have some looping images of this wonderful experience our students and staff had at both Student Leadership Summit opportunities. Furthermore, I would like to thank Dr. Posley and President Miller for formulating the vision for our first Student Leadership Summit within the Milwaukee Public Schools. I now will have Mr. John Jagman, District Discipline Manager, Underfield, to introduce himself and our wonderful MPS students who will provide a detailed report of recommended actions.
President Miller, members of the board, my name is John Jagman, District Discipline Manager, Underfill. Our work with the Student Leadership Summit ties directly into the 5 priorities for success, specifically looking at improving district and school culture and strengthening communication and collaboration. The purpose of the Student Leadership Summit was to engage student voice in district climate and discipline policies and practices. The summit increased student leadership and change throughout the district. We have some students who participated in the summits present to speak in further detail. I would now like to introduce Cortez Morris, recent graduate from James Madison High School.
President Miller, members of the board, my name is Cortez Morris, a recent graduate from James Madison. Every traditional MPS middle and high school has a student discipline committee that meets throughout the school year. These committees created a dialogue with students on the school climate and allowed for students to provide recommendations on the climate and discipline. The first part of the 2019 Student Leadership Summit occurred on January 16, 2019 at UWM. At the summit, students brainstormed ideas around climate and leadership, worked on some team building activities, built up their leadership skills, had opportunities to practice presentation skills, and outlined the work ahead for the remainder of the school year.
President Miller, I'm a members of the board. My name is Richard Mejia. I'm from Project State. I will be a senior this fall. At the summit, Dr. Posley and the President Miller will be speaking to students and attending primary breaking out seasons on a leadership and team building. There you go.
The second part of the 2019 Student Leadership Summit occurred on May 7, 2019 at Syrup Hall. At this session, student groups from each school presented their recommendations for climate and discipline to the other schools in attendance. In the afternoon, a representative from each school met to work on the final recommendations to the district on climate and discipline. All other students in attendance chose various breakout sessions to continue their work around becoming stronger leaders.
President Miller, members of the board. My name is Med O'Connor from Wedgwood, and I will be entering 8th grade in the fall. The first recommendation from the students was to implement the district cell phone policy consistently in all schools, and with all students. Students also recommend for all teachers and staff members to lead by example by showing and teaching students appropriate use of electronics throughout the day. Students are recommending to collaborate with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council to continue this work. Students would also like to see more career education courses at all schools, including financial planning, culinary arts, and entrepreneurship opportunities. Students would also like to see smaller class sizes to provide teachers with more opportunities to work with students in the classroom.
President Miller, members of the board, my name is Bia Kalan from Reagan, and I will be a junior in the fall. The third recommendation would be for more professional development for all staff members with implicit bias, relationship building, community building, and bullying prevention. The final recommendation from students is to increase restorative practices throughout the district with more opportunities to talk with students with behavior issues instead of referring to exclusionary practices. Students would like to see schools facilitate student transition back into the school community after a suspension. Through restorative practices, students would also like to strengthen student leadership opportunities in all schools and throughout the district.
President Miller, members of the board, my name is John Jagman. After the Student Leadership Summit and these recommendations, our next steps are creating a menu of supports for all schools, increasing accessibility to these supports for everyone, and to continue to strengthen student leadership. We will now bring up all 4 of the students and open it up to questions from the board.
Bless you. All right. Do board members have questions? Yes, we'll start down here.
Thank you, President Miller. And thank you to the students for coming. This is great to see how much work you did throughout the whole year. I just have a question in terms of when you're talking about creating a menu of support, what kind of things do you want on that menu, and do you think that people need to know more about? In terms of, it says, just to clarify my question, we have the 4 recommendations that you just read to us, and then it said the next step is to make a menu of support and to increase accessibility to students, family, and staff members. So I'm just interested to know, like, what are the things that you want us to get out to the community for them to understand?
My name is Bia Kalan from Reagan. President Miller and Director. My name is Kalan. So out of the 4 recommendations, I think I'm gonna answer in a way that I think I understand your question. So overall, personally speaking from my school, because I can only speak for my school, we have strong academic support. But all of us in our OCR committee do see the lack of emotional support and mental support. So coming to school, I believe we have such strong academic supports, but when we seek for emotional, say mental, where do we get it? We don't have a platform where students can go into a room or talk to a teacher about their like personal issues. Because you go to school, yeah, academics is important, but the foundation, their base, comes from their own inner self. And when they don't have the confidence or the motivation to come to school, then they're going to school just to go to school, you know what I mean? So for me personally, for my school, speaking from my group, we've talked a lot about how there's so much lack of emotional and mental support. Even though we have academic supports, it's great, it's important, but we're missing that emotional piece really big, like really strongly.
Thank you. That's quite clear what you're saying. Other questions? Other questions? Yes, Director Taylor.
I want to say thank you all for coming. I actually did get a chance to hear some of you talk at the summit. When I see you talking about the career education, which is great with the financial planning, the arts and entrepreneurships, were you speaking more towards the high school level of needing these things, or was it just overall?
President Miller and Director Taylor, I say that we're speaking about overall. I think that it needs to be in every school that they see emotional feelings with the teachers and things like that. So I think it's just not a high school thing, but if you learn it in middle school, elementary school as well, then it'll be better for you in the future. So.
Thank you. And then,
Follow up, Dr. Taylor.
yeah, thank you for that. And then the last one was more about the student transition back for suspension. I know we've all talked about that a lot, and maybe you guys don't have exactly how you want them steps to go, but I would love to hear, how do you think the transition should look with a student coming back to school after a suspension?
President Miller and Director Taylor, my name is Bia Kalan from Reagan. So we do have a whole process. So when we presented restorative practices, we had the process all planned out from like when the students get suspended until they come back. So our whole plan with restorative practices is that they get suspended, but before they do, they sit down and talk with the teacher, the principal, the student, but the student will be having advocates with one teacher advocate and one student advocate, so that when they're in that circle, they don't feel overwhelmed, they don't feel overpowered. And right there, you're defining the root of the problem and you're fixing it right there and then. So that for future benefits, they're not holding grudges, problems aren't repeated. And then after that part of the communication is done, students are getting suspended, but after they come back, they do that redo that circle again. Some teacher, assign a teacher, or maybe the principal, maybe their teacher advocate, they come back and talk with the teacher, talk with the students, like, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing any better? Because for Reagan, we did do a video, but we didn't present it. We did do a play per se, where we presented stories, personal stories, where we asked students about their personal suspension stories. And students were called, these are from their quotes, they were called drug addicts within their meeting. And they come back, and what if they were drug addicts? Why aren't we checking up on them? Like, you're just suspending them, you're wasting their time, they're missing out on important schoolwork, and you're expecting them to come up great, great and fresh. That's not gonna happen. So when they do come back, a teacher needs to check up on them, how they're doing, are they gonna catch up on their work, how is their emotional being, like, yeah, just some teacher checking up on them.
Thank you. That's it. This is the last follow back. Thank you for saying that. And I just like how our students have a plan in place to ensure that the student did have some disciplinary, but then there was a follow-up to make sure when they came back to school that the same problems wouldn't be represented. And the story that you talked about with the drug addict thing, I actually had a conversation about that because I was there for that. So I'm glad that you brought it up. And we are definitely looking to put some things in place and having that student voice to ensure that we're including you at the table to make sure that it's beneficial for all of the students as well as the staff. So thank you guys again. Thank you, President Miller.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. Thank you. We can do that. Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Wahara.
Would you be willing to share that video with it, send it to the governance? Is that made public or?
So we originally had a video,
Oh, okay.
but we didn't present that video. We presented in a way that one of our students just like played it out.
Okay.
But we do have the video.
Okay.
I have the video on my phone. We do have the video, so if you would like to see it, if you would like for me to send it anywhere, I can send it to you. Next year, we were actually planning on having a more like wider project based off of that too, having students talk about their own personal stories and saying, I'm just one student, but when it's just one student, it piles up to being just a mass amount of students. So if you would like to know more about that, then yeah, I
I'd
can definitely
absolutely
do that.
like to know more about that. Thank you so much for all your work and
Okay.
for presenting tonight.
Good. Director Peterson.
Yes, thank you. I was privileged enough to see all the skits and presentations at the May event, and they were very impressive. I know our whole board is very in favor of promoting restorative practices. What you described seemed to make a lot of sense. I was wondering if you had any suggestions would be the best, as to the best way to get, like, your large high schools really promoting restorative practices, not just with one teacher, say, but the whole shebang.
President Miller, Director Peterson, Cortez Morris, recent graduate from James Madison. I feel like it just shouldn't be in just the large high schools. I feel like it should be in every high school, just not, because I feel like every student should take restorative practices because it really gets down and defined into the school, and that's how the school becomes better in a way, because people know each other, feelings and what's going on in their life and things like that. So people would respect people more. And I feel like, I really feel like restorative practices shouldn't just be in large high schools, but overall in every classroom, and that students should take it as a freshman in school as well, so.
Just a follow-up? So you're saying that you suggest that all freshman students have a restorative practice class?
Yes, sir, in a
And
way.
smaller smaller high schools too, I mean, I agree.
Yes, sir. In a way, but also there should be a classroom assigned like sophomore, junior, senior year that kids could take as a extracurricular activity. So.
President Miller and Director Peterson, my name is Bia Kalan from Reagan. So we already have a start. In my opinion, MPS has implemented OCR, and that is our start. We have student voice. So from there on, we have representatives within that committee who can promote that. Our whole idea was to have students from there raise awareness, promote this whole restorative practices thing, be in charge of it, and then we pick teacher advocates, student advocates, and for Reagan, that is our whole plan in implementing restorative practices, because we already have a start. MPS has implemented this great student voice, so like using that would be great.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Yes, Director. Oh, go ahead, please.
President Miller and Director Peterson, my name is Met O'Connor, and I'm from Wedgwood. I think that restorative practices should be implemented as Cortez had said, and also Halan, because teaching children how to deal with problems civilly and become fully fledged adults will pave the way into our society so that they can go out and do things, become part of the world.
That's great, thank you. Director Paez.
President Miller, thank you. Thank you all for your wonderful insights and being a part of this effort to try to help us improve what we're doing in schools. I had a couple of questions. One is that you talk among your recommendations about talking to students with behavior problems. It happens differently in every school, obviously, okay, according to many factors, okay? But restorative practices alone doesn't address that, okay? It's sort of like gets to certain kinds of people, but in certain schools, it doesn't get to all the people who happen to be suspended more, okay? I'm wondering, given that and that you have an OCR committee, how much do you discuss getting to everybody and strategies that address not only creating, projects like restorative justice, but other kinds of things. How do you involve other people in the school? You talk about teachers, and you talk about, students, et cetera, but, I know that typically, when you're dealing with suspensions and others, there's a whole mess of other people involved. Have you guys talked about that? What kinds of ideas and insights do you have that we can then follow up on?
President Miller and Vice President Bates, so I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing wrong.
Yeah,
My
don't
name is
worry.
Bia Kalan from Reagan. So this whole part is putting blame on the students and putting stress on the students. But to be brutally honest, it's not always about the students also. It's sometimes, all the students in the classroom are aware when the student picks out that same kid over and over again. We're all like, oh, like again? So it comes down to where we talked about the recommendation about how we want more professional development for all staff members. We would love for it to be mandatory. We do know that some are mandatory and some are by choice, but we would love it if all staff members are mandated to go to implicit bias trainings and relationship building and all these trainings, so that it wouldn't just be like, student, this is your fault, go fix it. It would also be, hey, teachers, look at this too, So it would be two sides.
President,
Thank you.
President
Any other-
Miller,
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
President Miller, Vice President Baez, I believe that's your name.
Don't worry about the pronunciation.
Got it.
Okay,
You got it, Mr. Morris.
You got it.
So basically, explicit bias is something that JMAC has been working on. We have a group at our school, and it's called the CSYC Community School Youth Council. And we actually had got a grant that we actually worked with teachers this year on explicit bias to better themselves and better their skills with talking to students and dealing with problems with students and feeling comfortable with teaching students at the school. So hopefully that this year it goes better. But that's one of the things that our main focus was on at JMAC, so.
Thank you.
No problem.
Go ahead.
President Miller, and Vice President Baez, I just wanted to say that I wish our school had that. I'm from Richmond here, I'm from Project State, and we actually don't, because I feel like some students like get that depression and be like, oh, like they get arguments with teachers, but like I wish our school did, because like we have a small groups of kids, we have like 20, 30 kids like in our class, but like some of them get mad and they don't got that type like other schools do. So like I feel like our school should, so we can all get into our feelings, because I feel like some teachers don't understand what students are going through, because like they're like, oh yeah, we can fix that at home, but like actually you don't know if it's a school problem or like just friends or family wise. Like I feel like all schools should have it instead of one, and that's important, so teachers understand what students are going through.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
And including restorative practices and paying more attention to the students, that will really help them like emotionally with their behavior. Because I had a math teacher notice that I wasn't paying attention anymore because I was going through something very difficult, and she helped me, so.
So to me, what I'm hearing from you students is a lesson in what this board and this district should be doing. We should be hearing exactly what you're saying. So one of the things that I'd like to do with all of you and all of your classmates and other people that you know, on the 25th of July, this coming month, there are two resolutions that are coming forward to the board. One is on restorative practices, to make this a restorative practices district in every school. Okay, so, but that's, we have 10,000 employees and we have 160 schools, so you can't just say this is it. We have to do training, just like you said, implicit bias. There's another resolution coming the same night that is coming intentionally at the same time, which is an anti-racist, anti-bias resolution that's going to bring the two together to talk about how we're going to transform this district, and we will become restorative, in my perspective, we'll become a restorative practices through a racial lens district. And that's going to really it's already started, and there's a lot of work that's gone on, but it's going to be formalized, hopefully, on the 25th. So on the 25th, there are no committee meetings this coming month, just the meeting on the 25th, but we'll be taking public input. So it would be great if when this item comes up, that you come to the board meeting, address it, and raise what you've raised tonight for the whole community, but also bring some new ideas, because it's really gonna start, it's gonna grow even larger come the 25th.
President Miller, can I just make a comment about that?
Sure.
I really love that idea of combination of the all that. Just because we have looked into the suspension rates with population and race, and the population in the ethnicities is not proportionate to the school population. And that is something so important that we need to work on as a district. So I would really love that.
Thank you. I hope that you'll be there to address the issue and raise all the issues that you wish to raise. It's great. Any other comments by board members? Thank you so much. This has been an educational moment for all of us. Okay, Madam Secretary, I'll hold off just a moment while we reorganize here. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Posley and Mr. Boswell, for creating this process. This is very encouraging. Madam Secretary, what is the next communication?
The next communication is action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, salary increases and decreases. The recommendation is that the board authorize the individuals to be appointed, promoted, or reassigned, or reclassified, and that the decreases and increases in salary be effective as indicated in the attachments to this item. As a reminder, this item was noticed for public hearing. The giving of public hearing will require a 2/3 vote of the board per Board Rule 1.09. Also, in regards to this item, the board may retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, section 19.85, parent 1, parent C, which allows a governing body to go into closed session for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data over any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
At what point, Madam Secretary, do we consider a 2/3 vote?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is the point where the board would take a vote to consider public testimony on this item.
And would you explain why we're doing this when normally at this meeting, I said earlier, there will be no taking of public input. Why are we doing it at this time?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this item is being brought forward directly to the board for consideration and has not gone through the committee process in which public hearing is allowed.
Thank you for that clarity. So, Madam Secretary, if we could proceed with taking the process of the 2/3 vote.
Mr. Chair, at this time, you would entertain a motion to give public hearing.
Okay.
I move that we have a public hearing on the items as described by the board clerk.
Second.
And we have Director Woodward and Director Bias seconded it. All right, please call the roll.
On Director Peterson's motion to give public hearing on communication number 2 by the Superintendent of Schools, seconded by Director Woodward. Director Bias.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor. Aye. Director Woodward.
Aye.
President Miller.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
Okay, we will proceed. Does the superintendent, do you wish to make comments?
Yes, President Miller and members of the board, there are recommendations for administrative appointments as well as reassignments before you. I would like to personally thank the Office of Board Governance as well as President Miller for your assistance in facilitating this item. And also, we are just trying to make sure that we have principals in place at the start of the school year. and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time in regards to this item.
Do board members have any questions or comments? Do we have any speaker slips, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chair, we have no speaker slips on this item.
Okay,
Chair,
yes.
I received an email from one of the parents at one of the schools.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
members of the board, if there are questions regarding individuals listed in this attachment, the board has been noticed that it may retire to executive session to have that discussion.
Is that something that you're,
Well, I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
please, proceed.
If that's the case, I think we should.
So what our general procedure is if an individual school's coming up, obviously we know who the person that's recommended, which we don't, we try not to discuss that in the public domain. We go into closed session for that. So I would take a recommendation for moving to closed session. Would this be the time to do it, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, that would be correct.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
before we
please.
move? Are the person or the individuals we're talking about in this list or in another list?
On this list.
On this list, okay. That's okay.
For clarity's sake, are there other issues that we could go into closed session with so that we don't, if we're going into closed session for anything else? I don't know if that's possible. Maybe we'd have to do it more than once, but I'm just asking for efficiency's sake.
Mr. Chair, given that this item was noticed separately and it is a special item, the exception that allows the board to go into closed session only applies to this particular item.
Thank you for that clarity. Okay, if we could get a motion to go into closed session. Yes.
Thank you, President Miller. I motion that we go into closed session.
Okay, we'll need a second. Can we get a second?
I second.
Okay, Director O'Halloran has seconded it. Okay, if you'll please call the roll.
On Director Simpson's motion to retire to closed session to consider communication number 2 by the Superintendent of Schools, seconded by Director O'Halloran. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
President Miller. Aye. That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
Okay, so at this time, if you'll note the time that we are leaving the board floor, and we shall proceed at this time.
Mr. Chair, just so that we are reading that item into the record, the board is retiring to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, section 19.85, parent 1, parent C, which allows a governing body to go into closed session for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data over any public employee over which the board has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
Thank you.
Milwaukee Recreation is a division of Milwaukee Public Schools, established in 1911 to enrich the lives of Milwaukee's youth, teens, adults, and seniors through educational and recreational opportunities. We have a strong commitment to serving everyone in our community. In 1961, our department was among the first in the nation to introduce modified recreation programs for youth and adults with physical and cognitive disabilities. Today, our adaptive sports program supports 19 different year-round opportunities. These programs are fun and affordable, and we're always looking for new participants. Milwaukee Recreation uses equipment that is specially designed or adapted for individuals with disabilities. For example, we use hand cycles instead of bicycles, baseballs and bases that emit beeps for the visually impaired, and power chairs equipped with guards to play power soccer. We have a large inventory of adaptive equipment, so you can always try it out before buying your own. And with a ratio of 1 instructor for every 4 participants, we provide a safe, educational, and rewarding experience for everyone who joins. Our programs are designed for individuals ages 6 and older who have physical disabilities, including spinal cord injury, MS, paralysis, amputation, visual impairments, and other physically limiting conditions. All ability levels are welcome, and Milwaukee residency is not required. We offer both recreational and competitive programs, including wheelchair basketball, beep baseball, hand cycling, quad rugby, and more. Activities are available year-round at convenient locations throughout Milwaukee. Our programs are open to all participants regardless of experience or skill level. Every sport builds strength, stamina, and self-esteem while enhancing quality of life. Milwaukee Recreation is a registered U.S. Paralympic sports club. This means we have access to special programming and national competitions like the Paralympics, which are held 2 weeks after the Olympics. We're proud to support our local veterans and active duty personnel with our Disabled Veterans Outreach Program. We launched this program in 2011 to help our servicemen and women lead happy and healthy lives when they return to Milwaukee. Milwaukee Recreation could not succeed without our long list of dedicated volunteers and community partners. For example, we work with Independence First to meet our staffing needs, create new programs, and secure the best equipment available. With Milwaukee Recreation's adaptive sports programs, the benefits are endless.
You get to come to practice every day and just see your friends, and it puts a big smile on your face, and it really makes your day better.
It's a good competition for boys and girls.
I recommend every parent to give it a try.
It's fun, you get to travel, and it's competitive, and I like competitive stuff.
He loves the tournaments, he loves the friends he's made here.
It's my activity after school, so I'm not in the house all day.
Get your kids involved if you can see what's going on here.
When I first started playing basketball, I was a little nervous, but I warmed up to the team fast.
Goalball has been a very fundamental part of my life. I really like this sport because it allows people who are blind or visually impaired to understand teamwork.
They are adapting to our skills, you know, our abilities, so it makes it easy for us to do it.
It's well worth your time. You may not really know what you're doing at first, but most of us don't. You just jump right in and people make you feel so welcome. It's a lot of fun, you stay so active and gives you something to do.
I strongly recommend that you participate, like go out there and try it out. Like it might be intimidating right away, but as soon as you get accustomed to it, it's one of the most beneficial things that I've ever been a part of.
As you've seen, we offer a unique opportunity for individuals with similar abilities to enjoy fun and competitive activities. These programs make a real difference, both mentally and physically. We're proud of the services we provide, but there's just one thing missing: you. No experience is necessary, so there's no time like the present. To get involved or learn more about Milwaukee Recreation's adaptive sports, please call us at 414-647-6043. or visit us on the web at milwaukeerecreation.net.
recommendation of the superintendent.
Is there a second? And Director Taylor, I second. Comment? Seeing any, please call the roll, Madam Secretary.
On Vice President Baez's motion to approve the administration's recommendation for administrative appointments, promotions, and reassignments, as well as the salary increases and decreases, seconded by Director Taylor. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
President Miller.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the board clerk, director, or the Office of Board Governance?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have our monthly legislative activities affecting MPS. Mr. Chris Thiel is here to give the report. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Good evening,
Proceed.
President Miller, members of the board. Chris Thiel from the Office of Governmental Relations. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, thank you. We are at the tail end of the state budget process. As many folks know, it's going to be a bit of an unusual report this evening, as many people here, in fact, everybody here was involved with the process, which I think is particularly important in terms of describing to the public where we are as a district and as a state when it comes to the K-12 education budget. As of yesterday, the state Senate passed and approved, by and large, what the Joint Committee on Finance moved out of its committee. And we are now at a moment where the budget document will be sent to the governor. The governor has options at this point, which include vetoing the whole document, using his line item veto authority, which is the most powerful in the country, or simply having the budget come to him and the budget could pass without him signing it. What we believe is happening right now is that his staff is going through the document to see where there are opportunities for line item vetoes. As I'm sure you've heard, the governor's been asked multiple times, will he veto the entire document? And he has consistently said we need to get a hold of the budget and take a look at it to see what action we might take. I think it's worth reviewing the last year and a half, 2 years, very quickly in terms of what this district has done in partnership with school districts across the state and advocacy organizations, in that we've taken every opportunity to communicate to the state legislature what is needed for schools, not only in Milwaukee, but across the state of Wisconsin. We have participated directly in the Blue Ribbon Commission on K-12 Education, which was the Speaker's task force to review what was needed for schools in our state. They put out a report that included many items that actually, if they had been put into state law, would have begun to address the needs of our students. So it's a bit of an unusual year here, in that not only have we had the No Time to Lose report from the National Conference of the State Legislature, which lays out what we should be doing on behalf of our children. We have the legislature's own Blue Ribbon Commission report, which lays out clearly what we should be doing on behalf of our children. Then we had a state budget document, which, as we discussed here, as the state superintendent's budget became the governor's budget, we had 60% funding for students with disabilities, which is crucial. We had funding targeted to closing the achievement gaps in the state of Wisconsin, which we know to be crucial. And many of those items were in concert with what the legislature stated that it knew it needed to do. And unfortunately, this week, the legislature has not done those things. So we have a state budget before us which does not meet the needs of the students of the state of Wisconsin. It does not meet the needs of the students in the city of Milwaukee. And frankly, we had an unprecedented moment this week. Last month, as we sat here, Director O'Halloran said we are going to march on behalf of our children to the state capitol, and started out in the community of Palmyra, on Saturday, and the board joined with the people of Palmyra. The superintendent joined with the people of Palmyra. So just as further evidence of doing everything possible to communicate to the state legislature and to make clear that in no uncertain terms they heard and they knew, and there was no moment of confusion, and there was no moment where you could say, well, you know, maybe we've missed something. The state legislature clearly understands what it should be doing. The state legislature is not doing it, unfortunately. So I'm happy to take questions on it, on this, but what was clear from that action is that, as we've talked many times here before, the joining of urban districts and suburban districts and rural districts was crucial. We know that the parents and the children who marched and ultimately made it to the state capitol the same day that the budget was being voted on were directly outside. We had state legislators come out and join us, and I think Senator LaTanya Johnson deserves a word of thanks again. Representative Evan Goyke deserves a word of thanks again for their long commitment. Their staffs deserve our thanks for the time and effort that they put in to fight on behalf of our students. Our delegation deserves our thanks as they were on the floor speaking about the needs of our children. And even though there are a lot of things that we know needed to happen over this past week, the conversation has changed in the state of Wisconsin. There is a Marquette Law School poll question now that asks the people of Wisconsin, do you think that we should increase investment in students with disabilities? Over 70% now consistently say yes. And so we have a bit of a different dialogue that we didn't have 11 months ago, which is important. But I'm reviewing all these things because for those who were not did not have the opportunity to understand what was going on over the last couple of years. If the question is, have we done enough to communicate to the state legislature what the needs of the students of the state are? Absolutely, at every turn. Whether it's this board, the superintendent, our colleagues and partners across the state. So we are in this moment where it is very clear that we put all the work in that is needed, and we will have to wait to see what opportunities may be available to the governor as he reviews the state budget. And I can go over some of the details right now, but we know that we're having a $200 per pupil increase in the first year, $204 in the second year. Those are less than the rate of inflation increases, unfortunately. We were fighting for 60% reimbursement for special education. We're only going to see a 1% increase next year to 26, and then 30 the following year, 30%. And the other, these are items that are called for under our state constitution. The other increase that was highlighted was the governor's increase for English language learners. And the state legislature in their budget completely slashed those monies. There will be no increase. And as we talked about before, we are currently last in the nation in funding to support students in that area. So all the effort has been put in, certainly laudable and meaningful going forward. And we will continue to work with the governor's office as best we can to make sure that if there are opportunities here in the near term, that we take advantage of those. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Do board members have any comments or questions?
I should just like to add that in conversations with the Wisconsin Association of School Board Members, they have consistently also supported this idea and the issues that we have raised, particularly the special education area and the resources for English language learners. So we are not alone. There's a lot of people around the state that, as Mr. Tio has mentioned, have been supporting the idea that funding for public education in this state has to increase, and that the actions of the current legislature by slashing many of these funds, it's inherently the kind of thing that I have argued and other people have argued is really a constitutional and a civil rights violations, and that we may at some point have to do more than we have up to now, even though I think that we have done a lot and people need to know that we're not idle on this, that we continue to push in this area, as you well know. Thank you.
Other comments? Yes, Director O'Halloran.
I did want to add that I know we did get a little media coverage in Milwaukee about this, and I say a little because in comparison, across the state, if you go to my director page on Facebook, we had at least 16 mentions or front page news in some of these communities really highlighting this need. And I'm really proud that along the way, we heard from those communities, but we also shared about the good work that Milwaukee is doing. And, you know, I got to speak about my kids' own school, about how great Cooper is, and that on the last day, we were represented by an MPS graduate on the steps of the Capitol. And so even though it seems like in Milwaukee we might not have heard about this, it was heard and felt along the way. And I'm just really proud that we were able to participate in the planning and kind of be leaders in this conversation.
Thank you for giving leadership. Other comments, questions? Director Peterson.
I just want to mention that and reinforce what has been said in terms of what both that we have worked hard. Obviously, people in the audience I know looking out also participated in many of the different activities over the last several months, demanding that there be an increase in funding for our schools. I think we're most disappointed. One of the people most disappointing was Luther Olson, who I think was very active in the Blue Ribbon report, and yet did not have the stamina to stand up and vote in favor of such a thing. He did make one recommendation, however, which is that Milwaukee should go to a referendum if we need more money, and I think that is one of the tools that we have left in our toolbox. We'll be talking about that in the future.
Comments? Seeing any? That report. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
Yes, Mr. President, there is one communication from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. The first communication is action on a request to retire to executive session in order to confer with legal counsel regarding litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved. This item has been noticed for executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, section 19.85, parent G, to confer with legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. The Office of Accountability and Efficiency recommends that the board determine how it wishes to proceed with this item.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Matt Chasen from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency would like to weigh in prior to.
Please do so, Mr. Chasen.
President Miller, Matt Chasen, OAE. In the interest of efficiency and being mindful of people's time, I'm going to respectfully ask that this item be moved to the end of this evening's agenda.
Thank you. That's doable, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chair, so noted.
Thank you. Next item, please.
The next item is the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, student expulsions.
I will entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the report of the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Second. I have a motion, Director Peterson, followed by with a second by Director Baez. Are there any comments or questions by board members? Not seeing any, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Peterson's motion to accept the reports of the independent hearing officers, seconded by Vice President Baez. Vice President Baez?
Aye.
Director Herndon?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Peterson?
Aye.
Director Phillips?
Aye.
Director Seamson?
Aye.
Director Taylor?
Aye.
Director Woodward?
Aye.
President Miller?
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
We will now have the reports of the standing committees. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not give public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 2, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of Director Peterson. Item 3, action on monthly finance matters, authorization to make purchases, reports on revenues and expenses, monthly expenditure control report, the report on administrative and school funds transfers, the report on contracts under $50,000 and their cumulative totals, the report on monthly grant awards, the acceptance of donations. Those items are set aside in item number 3, and they're set aside for separate consideration of the blanket agreement with the Athletic Equipment Repair Corporation. Item 6, action on resolution 1920R-003 by Directors O'Halloran and Simpson regarding non-student work time has been set aside for separate consideration by the administration. Item 11, action on a request to enter into the intergovernmental cooperative agreement with the City of Milwaukee regarding the truancy abatement and burglary suppression program, TABS, has been set aside at the request of the administration to present a revised draft contract for approval.
Do any board members wish any additional items to be set aside?
President Miller?
Yes.
I don't think I need my item that you said set aside because the question has been answered.
So noted.
And so we can, Madam Secretary, we can just withdraw that?
Withdrawn.
Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report have been set aside.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside? Not seeing any. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. Item 3, the report with possible action regarding the 53206 initiative has been set aside at the request of Director Baez.
Do any board members wish any additional items to be set aside under this report? Madam Secretary, what is the next item?
Mr. Chair, at this time, we would entertain a motion on the balance of the reports.
Can I get a second on the balance of reports? Second. Okay. Any comments, questions? Not seeing any. Please call the roll, Madam Secretary.
On Director Phillips' motion to approve the balance of the standing committee reports, seconded by Director Herndon. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon. Aye. Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
President Miller.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, would this be the appropriate time for Director Phillips to make her notary comments?
So noted.
Do we have anyone here that is up for promotion, hire, or appointment? Please stand. Thank you so much for your service to Milwaukee Public Schools. Go forth and do great things. Let's give these people a round of applause.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what's the next item?
The next item set aside would be item number 3 of the reports of the Accountability, Finance, and Personnel Committee, action on monthly finance matters, authorization to make purchases, the report on revenues and expenses, the monthly expenditure control report, the report on administrative and school funds transfers, the report on contracts under $50,000 and their cumulative totals, and the monthly report on grant awards, as well as the acceptance of donations. This item has been set aside for separate consideration of the blanket contract with the Athletic Equipment Repair Corporation.
Does the administration wish to make comments?
President Miller, members of the committee, not at this time.
Accountability.
President Miller, Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. So it was on June 17th that our office had received an appeal on bid 5770 for athletic cleaning, reconditioning, and repair services. In order to permit time for a review of this appeal, this item was requested we move forward to the full board without recommendation. In that time, we've reviewed the appeal in consultation with the city attorney's office, and at this time, we can find no reason for the board not to accept the administration's recommendation of award.
Board members wish to make any comments, ask any questions? Not seeing any, what's the pleasure of the board?
I move the recommendation of the administration.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, Director Baez has moved it with a second by Director Phillips. Please call the roll.
On Director Baez's motion to approve item number 3, inclusive of all of the contracts and attachments as listed in the committee report, and forwarded to the board, seconded by Director Phillips. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon. Aye. Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
President Miller.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item set aside is item 6 of the reports of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. Action on Resolution 1920R-003 by Directors O'Halloran and Seamson regarding non-student work time. This item has been set aside at the request of the administration.
Does the administration wish to make comments?
Yes. President Miller and members of the board, Keith.
Hold on for 1 second. Dr. Posley, could I speak to somebody, please? I don't know what's going on. We're getting some, Dr. Posey, we're getting some feedback, so we're trying to work it out here. I'm listening to everybody speak twice. That's a rough one. Okay, if we could proceed, Dr. Posey, do you wish to make comments?
Yes. President Miller and members of the board, Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. This item has been set aside to request consideration for additional time for exploration and collaboration. We had an opportunity to hear from teachers during the public testimony, and we think it is only fitting that the administration has provided ample time to further explore concerns that have been recently raised. In the spirit of collaboration, we believe it is important to work together with all parties as we consider a plan for implementation. Administration feels additional time is needed to flush out the impact, possible risk, and efforts on social, emotional, and academic well-being of all students. At this time, we are requesting additional time for collaboration with the MTEA and all employee groups, and come back to the board with findings in July. We're prepared to answer any questions that you may have in regards to our request.
Comments or questions by board members? Yes, Director Phillips.
Thank you, President Miller. I appreciate the sentiment from the superintendent that he wants to ensure that this collaboration happens and that we hear from all people. I did vote for this during the committee, and I'm still in support of this resolution because I believe that the parameters for providing a plan by July will provide the administration time to work with those people, as stated here. And I look forward to hearing that plan, but I appreciate that we are all recognizing, I believe as a board as well, that any sort of plan that comes forth from administration in July would be inclusive of everyone that we have working in our schools. So with that, I'm in support of the committee's recommendation that has already been moved forward.
Director Herndon.
I would like to say that in the resolution, it states July 25th as the more or less cutoff date. And I'd like to ask the superintendent if this is the date he has in mind when he says he needs time till July. I'd like to confirm that.
President Miller, members of the committee, yes, we will be more than happy to get back on the 25th with that information.
Thank you.
Director Bias.
Yeah, I wanted to get a sense of this very well. I understand that there was a reaction to the resolution. And I understand from the committee's actions that the intent of this resolution was really to give continuance to what we already started to do as a board, that we have a district that respects professionalization, that works with people, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering what, if we pass this resolution, that the perception out there seems to be, according to the letters I read, okay, that it would prevent us from having a plan that is inclusive of different ways of doing this, okay? Is the idea of the resolution to sort of like say, this is the way it's going to be, and the superintendent is to make this happen, okay? Or is the intent of the resolution to encourage the idea of unity in the district? We obviously have concerns about teachers and teachers' professionalization and their time and all of that stuff. But at the same time, we are a district that has been talking about the whole issue of transforming how we teach, how we administer, how we, comport ourselves. And it seems to me that we have to create a unitary system. It has to be the kind of system that allows everybody to weigh in on how to make this better, okay? And if there is the perception out there that this resolution is in any way holding that back, okay, I think we need to talk about that, okay? If the perception that people have, particularly administrators of this resolution, is that it doesn't add to the idea of a unitary system, or a system that is going to get us all together, on board, making things possible, working to implement anti-racist education, transformative education, restorative justice, that people need to come together in those buildings, in those schools to do it, and that there should be no way that people sort of like skip out of that, okay? I want to make sure that we are clear on that you as an administration, you have the opportunity to then come to us, and that what you will bring to us will have some weight in that process. So I just wanted to sort of like get some of that thinking going on, because we have to be a unitary system. We cannot be the kind of system that says we will do this for one group, we will not do this for the other group. This idea of, them versus us, we need to stop that. We need to, we can't allow ourselves to have people out in the community and everywhere else saying Milwaukee Public Schools is totally divided, okay? I don't think that this resolution does that, okay? But if there's that perception out there, then let's talk about it, okay?
I just wanted to speak to a couple of points that I think need to be heard again. And one of them is just the idea that this takes away from professional development time. So the resolution is speaking to that time, not of professional development, not of reducing professional development time, but of time that is governed currently by the teachers to work independently. So it's not taking away from the important professional development that needs to happen in our district, so that we do have a unified vision.
I would also like to say that, you know, in terms of moving forward to July, if we pass this resolution this evening, that still does provide a month of time for collaboration to happen with all stakeholders to look at the details of what this would look like in action. And I think that the idea that collaboration only happens within the four walls of a school is just something from days gone by a little bit. You know, the idea that, you know, I can only work here in this space to get something done. You know, I see collaboration happening often all around me by other professional groups that happen in a Starbucks coffee shop or, you know, wherever that, you know, it doesn't have to be in my classroom or in my school in order for there to be productive and meaningful work happening. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to share that I got as many as like 50 or more emails regarding this. And what stood out to me was the fact that many of the senders of those emails totally misunderstood the resolution. So I formulated a response to them that quietened their fears. Their fear was expressed in the emails as, we can't do this because I'm going to have staff running in and out of the classroom and out of the building off and on throughout the day. That then we're going to have to hire subs to cover them during the school day. It's going to be a disaster because there aren't going to be teachers putting my students on the buses. And oh my gosh, what if the bus is late, the sky is falling? So my response to them was, while the resolution is silent on the number of administrative times per month, it's understood that the principals still maintain 4 hours of administrative time monthly for professional development, staff meetings, and committee meetings. Further, it's understood that teachers do not leave the building during the student day, during any of their AMP or prep time. This is simply returning to having control of non-student contact time at the end or beginning of the day based on whether the school is early or late start. I would ask that the superintendent confirm that my response is correct.
Dr. Posen?
President Miller, members of the committee, one of the things that, with the spirit of the resolution, that is work that has been done for a number of years, ever since 2013. And I've been privileged to be able to be in that work from day one, when we had when the administration had every single day, and we went back and forth across the street until we got it to 2 days a week. And when I walked into this job in 2018, I turned it around and gave it 1 day a week, which they have right now. The problem that I have with the resolution is the idea around AMP time. When we talk about AMP time during the regular run of the school day, that is a management issue on behalf of the administration to be able to know if somebody's in or out or whatever the situation may be. And the letters that I received, the same type of letters, the letters that I received also asked the question, can other employee groups leave and do the same thing as well? And so as the superintendent of the district, I personally need time to be able to give clear answers around that particular piece. Yes, we had a team of individuals that have worked together in the past to come up with a strategy around this. I am even open and close in the spirit of what that looks like. And that chart that we have pulled together spells out those kinds of things, but this resolution says that they can leave during AMP time and do that. And if it's passed this way, it boxed the administration in on being able to adhere to some of those concerns that we have. I'm the first individual to say that we want to treat everyone like professionals, but I want to be fair to all individuals that come into our doors. And I am open to sitting down with any employee group to work this out. And I think the solution that I'm asking for is give us the autonomy to sit down with the MTEA or whomever, whatever group, and come back on the 25th with concrete ways, path forward.
Peterson, then Director.
I also received the various letters from the, mainly from principals, and I appreciate their input. I appreciate anybody's letters or emails concerning board business. I understand why, the thing that came through mostly, most strongly, was, I think, in response to the first further resolve that says this flexibility include the reasonable ability for teachers to leave their schools during their non-student work time. I believe that what was meant was before and after school. How it was interpreted by many principals was during the school day. So if I used to have like 30 minutes of music and 45 minutes of art every week. The music was every other week, but for me to run out during that time, that wasn't the intention of the resolution. But I can see why people saw it that way and read it. They weren't, and so that would not be a policy that I would support. I know people during their lunchtime, if they can, that's their time. They can go out. They have to come back by whatever. So I think it'd be, if we pass this particular resolution, I would encourage that further resolve being taken out. I was thinking of proposing an alternative, and I just want to say some of the points that I would put in that. One is the question of, okay, if in the past, before Act 10 dissolved our contracts, teachers had to be at the school a certain amount of time. And it varied from high school to middle school to K-8 schools to elementary schools. It had to do with student contact time. It had to do with a whole bunch of things. Generally, people could come 5 minutes or 10 minutes before the class, the school day started, and could leave 5 or 10 minutes after the class. Not the class, I mean the school day. The school day according to the level that they were in. And the contract, as most people know from around, basically gave the administration 2 hours of time per month for staff meetings and for all sorts of different things, whatever in terms of PD, team meetings, grade level meetings, et cetera, et cetera. My understanding is that the MTA supports having 4 hours of time for the administration for PD and grade level subject team meetings, PLCs, et cetera. And I appreciate that. And that's comparable, more or less, actually probably a little more than what currently is 1 day out of the 5 for elementary. It's comparable to 2 days out of the week for high schools, I believe, in terms of 30 plus 30 is 60. Anyway, the other thing that I think that is important in my mind, and I'm just sharing this in case no matter what resolution is passed in your discussions, I think 4 hours there should be a procedure to have that flexibly applied in the sense that maybe a school wants a 2-hour PD and then there'd be 2 1-hour meetings for the rest of the month. And so that there'd be a total of 4 hours still used, but could be used flexibly. My only notation on that is if that's the case, the scheduling of the meetings should be done well in advance, and it should be done obviously by the administration with the collaboration of this, the collaboration of the staff, the building committee, if one exists, would probably be the best place to do that. But there are reasonable questions to address in terms of, let's say we go back to the 5-minute or 10-minute after school ends, you can leave. I'm speaking as a 30-year experienced teacher in elementary grades that have a lot of busing. What happens, do we have bus duty? Who's on bus duty? What happens for late buses? In the past, the schools I was at, after 15 minutes, if somebody stayed longer, they got a part-time certified rate, because sometimes they'd stay 2 hours longer if their bus was really amiss. Emergency staff meetings, different job classifications, even under the old contract, there were some differences in terms of the amount of time that were spent. those are the kinds of things that I would like to see worked out between the administration and the MTA and other units. I would say also that I would like to see somehow us making a plan so the traditional PD days, and what used to be called banking days, could be done. I believe right now it's 3.5 hours for PD and 3.5 hours allocated for teacher prep time. I think that's a fair division. What I really felt badly about last year when all the snow days, made us eat up 2 of those days. I'd like to see us try to plan a school calendar that gives privileges to those PD days, because we really need those PD days. Even if it means extending the school year longer, or I know one year we had a Friday off before Memorial Day, and it was off, but if we had a snow day, that Friday was used up. There's different ways. So I'm giving some very concrete details to what I think needs to be fleshed out. My understanding is regardless of if this motion, whatever motion is passed, whether it's the current one as amended or an alternative one, or what the administration is saying, which that there'll be a public hearing at the next at the July full board meeting on the item, because there won't be a committee for it to go to first. Is that correct, that there would be a public hearing?
At the July meeting will be noticed for public hearing, as there will be no committee meetings in July.
Okay, thank you. So that would give everybody, of all points of view, another chance to give input into this important move forward. I just want to say personally, I support treating teachers as professionals. I believe that the features that I laid out and that have been laid out by other board members here is what's best for treating teachers as professionals. I think if one treats people as professionals, then they actually have a tendency more to act as professionals as well. And that's true not just for teachers. I think it's true for a lot of people. So thank you for listening to my long monologue. I'll keep them short in the future.
Yes, I just have one question to the authors of this resolution. And I would like to just know was all the schools contacted, or analysis was done of the schools that the type of things that they wanted in this, that they wanted time on? How many schools when you did? And
my understanding, there wasn't a specific school contacted, Director O'Halloran. Yeah.
Okay, and then there's another thing. Were you aware that in 2013 and 14, the workday was 30 minutes paid duty-free lunch, and in 2015-16, Dr. Driver made it 45 minutes duty-free lunch for elementary K-5, K-6, and K-8. And then in 2013-14, there was 3 administrators directed days. And also 6th to 8th grade and 9 through 12 schools, there were 4 administrative directed days. And in 2015-16, 6th to 8th through 12, 4 administrator directive days. For a shortened week, at least 1 teacher a day is preserved. So I think one of the things is that we have to start looking at the history and what has already been done, and try to see where we are, and then assess then. Dr. Posey, I think there has been some additional days already given to, can anybody explain that? Is there about the additional days that have already been granted to teachers?
Dr. Posey, do you have a response to that?
President Miller and members of the committee, yes. When I came into the assignment in 2018, I worked with the MTEA and gave an additional day back to teachers for their time.
Director Simpson, you were next, then Director Phillips, and I'm going to call in myself.
I guess just to clarify, it's not to ask for additional days to take away from professional development time, just to have control over where that work happens during that teacher-directed time. You know, I fully appreciate the superintendent's perspective on the AMP time, and I can absolutely agree with taking out the whereas, where it speaks to the ability to leave campus during their prep time, if that is understood as their AMP time during the student day, and focus on the hour before school and the hour after school as the time that a teacher can use their professional discretion about where their work needs to be done.
Director Phillips was next.
Thank you, President Miller, and I appreciate Dr. Simpson because I was going to provide that as a possible amendment, is to take out that whereas teachers are allowed to use some of their time during the workday, such as AMP, and time for students supporting tutoring if during that, there's more in that whereas, but I'm not going to utilize the time to read it because I think that's where some of this confusion is coming from. Seeing that the resolved is pretty clear, the first resolve talking specifically about non-student work time on teacher days before and after the student day. I'm uncertain to Director Peterson's point around the first further resolved, the second resolved, regarding the flexibility, including reasonable ability for teachers to leave their schools during non-student work time. If we take out that whereas, perhaps that takes away the confusion. I also wanted to note that Director Peterson had several ideas that were great, and this isn't a motion, this is just my own nomination that he be part of this process in bringing this plan together to represent the board, because he had a lot of things to provide.
Okay, I'm going to pass the gavel.
So noted.
Yes, I'm calling.
No, there's not a motion on the floor.
President Miller.
Director Woodward asked if there's a motion on the floor. No, there's not a motion on the floor.
No, I suggested one, but I didn't make one.
So, I have a number of, one, you know the old expression, first I voted against it, then I voted for it. Well, that's what happened. I put forward a substitute resolution to just advance it until we get a full proposal from the administration, and that was rejected. So then I voted for it because the sentiment of it, I think, is right. Except I think that there's in looking at it since then, I think there's a fundamental flaw in the way that it's written, and it's not just what Director Phillips is saying. It's teacher use non-student work time, and that's all it speaks to. It does not speak to any other group in the district. Principals, the AS, represented by ASC. It doesn't speak to paras. It doesn't speak to any other group, and I don't think it's right for us to select one particular, if in the spirit of what Director Baez was saying, it's not right to select one single group out, create a policy for them that's lenient, which I think we should have a very serious discussion about teacher time. I was one of those for 17 years, so, but I was in the high school, and I had up to an hour a day free time during the day. And I think that's still going on. If I'm, where there's a free, if it's not an hour, it's an hour and a half, depending on the block. So there's a lot to consider. And so my thinking is that we need to look at the whole picture in a more concrete way. And that's why I would never suggest that we restrict what we ask of the superintendent. We give the administration the authority to look at the whole frame, look at all the bargaining units, have some discussion, look at the best practices. And so instead of restricting it, I would suggest that we move it forward with the sentiment of what people have said. I think I did not hear anything from Director Peterson that I disagree with, but I want to look at, those were 4 or 5 points. I can't even repeat what they were. So I would like to look at the whole picture, having been organized and presented by Dr. Posley at the 25th meeting, and then take a position there. So Director Baez, I'm going to make a motion. My motion is that we move to get a proposal at the 25th meeting that encompasses this whole concept of flexible time. And I'm changing it beyond teacher time. I'm changing it flexible time to look at what it means for the whole district and get a report back and take a position at that time.
A motion on the floor.
Second.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I understand President Miller's perspective, and I certainly think other bargaining units, other work classifications should be looked at. I don't think it's out of order, however, for us to give direction to the administration as to what our sentiments are in terms of what the original resolution is saying. And it's not that it's restricting the administration to only talk about those things. I mentioned I want a whole bunch of things talked about. But it's pushing the administration and saying this is what the board sentiment is, and this is what we want them to really focus on. Some of the key things that we want them to focus on when they meet and confer with the MTA and other groups. And so I'm not in favor of the resolution which President Miller has put forth, or a motion, excuse me, not a resolution.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Members of the board, I just want to be sure that I've captured the motion correctly. Is that to move to direct the administration to provide a report to the board at the July 2019 board meeting on flexible time for district employees?
That would be correct.
Yes, please. Director Miller, and then Director Woodward, and then Director Simpson.
So it's unfortunate that you don't support it, Director Peterson, because what I thought you were reading was a friendly amendment. So I would be willing to accept all that you said as a friendly amendment, and because it's not in contradiction with what I'm asking for.
Director Woodward, then?
Yeah, I just have a question. Another thought too is that we've taken the rights of the principal to lead in their schools. The principals also are there for a purpose, and that is to direct the staff that's there under them. So I just wonder, does it look like we're taking away the responsibilities of the principal to direct her staff that they work?
Director Simpson?
I just wanted to, the very last further resolve does say that, administration would bring forward their plan to the board July 25th. So this really does give us a month yet to work on this resolution. And I guess if I can also just follow up with Director Woodward. So I'm just speaking from my personal experience that the teacher time we're speaking of, principals don't tell you what to do during that time, other than you have to be in the building. So I might choose to work on report cards. I might choose to work on updating data, about, behavior referrals. I might choose to clean my tables in my classroom. So that time is currently teacher directed, but you just have to do it in your classroom or in your school.
So and that happens throughout the whole district, all schools?
correct. Your teacher time is yours to determine how to best use that.
Yes. Why missed?
I think we're gonna jump on to a different motion and a couple other comments. I just wanted to clarify too, I think because we are going back and forth with the resolve and the whereas, just to make sure that we understood that the resolution wasn't speaking to the day that the students were there, like during the school day, but that we were speaking to before school and after the school day was finished. So I can just clarify that because I think that's where a lot of like the misinformation or understanding is coming from.
Anybody else? Yes, Dr. Miller.
Or the makers.
Just to follow up. Oh, I'm sorry, did you get your question?
No, because I guess it would go to the makers of the resolution, like the clarity of it. Yeah.
Yes, I do want to make clear that I was talking about not restricting the number of days. That would still be to the principals, right? They would still have the 4 days. And I would also like to point out that the resolution speaks to professional development. I know there was concern that we're limiting the amount of time for professional development. I fully support professional development. And as it pertains to during the day versus after or before school, I was specifically intending that to mean after or before school. So if the stumbling block is during the day, I would fully support removing that so that we can all move forward with this resolution and get on with the night. Because I think most of us up here are on that same page.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify as well too. And just one more thing, because I've been inundated with the emails from the principal, and I'm happy to see that they are really involved. And maybe this will just have a lot of them coming out more to the board meetings, so that they'll know kind of what's on the agenda and what's going on, so that we can work more collaboratively together. But thank you.
I will say it was great to hear so many people in support of restorative practices professional development, because when President Miller brought forth his resolution, we had one principal come to testify. So I'm really happy that I think the teachers are on board for that, the principals are on board for that, and the board is on board for that. So I'm really happy that we can all move forward with that resolution as well.
Mr. Chair.
For the listening audience, Director O'Halloran was doing the speaking.
Oh, sorry.
Just in case. Director Henderson?
I suggest that we tighten up and make our statements in this resolution more explicit so that it cannot be misunderstood.
Point of order, we're talking about a motion. We're not talking about the resolution.
There's a motion on the table first.
Then the
Yeah.
resolution.
Yeah. So can we speak on the resolution? And the motion? Yeah, the motion, I'm sorry. The motion. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to propose a.
Director Peterson.
I'd like to move a substitute motion, if that's permissive, Board Clerk.
Okay.
A substitute motion. That resolved that the Milwaukee Board of School Directors direct administration to meet with the MTA and other employee groups to develop procedures and guidelines on these and other matters relating to the teacher workday. Number one, teacher workday that begins approximately 5 to 10 minutes before and ends approximately 5 to 10 minutes after the student day. Two, a requirement that teachers participate in additional approximately 4 hours per month of PD, staff meetings, grade level, subject team meetings, and or PLCs at dates and times determined well in advance by the school administration in collaboration with their school building committee. Three, a procedure to allow schools flexibility to vary the length of the sessions so that, for example, they might have 2-hour PD sessions, then on a different day of the month have 2 one-hour meetings focusing on other matters. Four, other matters such as bus duty, late buses, emergency staff meetings, different job classifications, short months, and other concerns raised by students, parents, the administration, or the MTA. And fifth, a plan so that traditional PD days, formerly known as banking days, in which 3.5 hours is allocated to PD and the other 3.5 hours is allocated to teacher preparation time, be scheduled. in such a way as they do not become makeup days or days when schools are closed for inclement weather, when schools are closed. Further resolve that these procedures and guidelines be reviewed and approved by the school board of school directors and then codified in the employee handbook and other relevant documents pertaining to teachers' workday and schedules. And be it further resolved, the administration bring a plan for implementing this resolution for the 2019-2020 school year to the board no later than July 25th. I think actually both President Miller's motion, the original resolution, and my resolution have the same conclusion, which we'll have on July 25th, a plan that administration presents that has been met and conferred with the MTA and any other interested bargaining units. The reason I present this is it is much more explicit, but it is not limiting, because I said in other issues that anybody else brings up should be included. So I make that motion, and I happen to have a copy. Thank you.
There's a substitute motion on the floor. That's a mouthful, Director Peterson, so we're gonna have to.
You elected me.
Yes.
Given the length of the substitute motion so that board members understand and have in front of them what you would be voting on, would you like to take a 5-minute recess to be able to read the motion and understand what?
That makes sense. However, we have one member of the board that wanted to make a comment, Director Phillips.
Thank you, Chair Baez. I am in agreement with many of the sentiments of the substitute motion. However, it in some ways it goes against my idea around how resolutions are made and policies are made. I appreciate that it's explicit. However, it gets to the point that it's so narrow, it could come back to this board again within 3, 5, 7 years, because it is in some ways very, very explicit, and I don't want to take away the opportunity for those actual groups of people that are working in our schools to have that conversation and be able to speak to the things that you've stated. While I am in favor of them, I don't have the same perspective of the folks. So I understand that a lot of the anxiety around this resolution has to deal with some of the mixing of what is explicit, what isn't. So if something's explicit, does it mean that there's something underlying when things are vague? And I think that perhaps that's just a lesson for us as board members, that not necessarily being vague, but I really do think that it's important when we move something forward that there is room for that discussion when we say we want the administration and other units to actually be able to discuss and bring something back to the board. I don't necessarily think that we as a board have to provide an entire, like, what that actually means. And we can be a part of those discussions, but all that being said, that is why I wouldn't be in support of the substitute motion, not necessarily because of the content, but more so because of how I view resolutions and our work as the board.
We have a resolution on the floor, and we have a request for a 5-minute break to take a look at the text that is being provided by Director Peterson. We had some comments on the resolution. Can we take the 5-minute break right now?
So noted.
Pass on. Other comments by the board? Before I pass the gavel?
Madam Secretary. Wait, I would like forward a substitute.
Director O'Halloran, can you
Sorry.
wait a second so I can pass the gavel to the chair?
Okay.
Director Halloran.
Yes, I would like to put forward a substitute resolution. Motion, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Thank you. It seems like one of the big stumbling blocks is about during the day, so I would gladly remove some of the verbiage and tighten up just the further resolved so that we recognize all we are talking about is changing the location of where the teacher-directed non-student time is occurring, if so wanted or chosen by the teachers. And I would say that I saw today that there are teachers who are working on things in coffee shops, even when they aren't required to be in the building. So I know this work is occurring. So if the big stumbling block, Madam Secretary, then should I remove this whereas teachers are allowed to use some of their time during the workday, that paragraph, and remove the whereas during their workdays, teachers face many stressors, which they do, but apparently we don't need to say it in this. And we can tighten up the further resolved that this flexibility include the reasonable ability for teachers to leave their schools during their non-student work time before and or after school. And I would ask that when I put this forward, that the intent behind that also give recognition to Director Peterson's very good ideas, and that when administration is working with the however many bargaining units administration sees fit, that they would include Director Peterson's suggestions. Just, it doesn't have to be in the resolution, just as consideration, please.
We have a second.
I second.
Second, Director Simpson. I'm going to pass the gavel.
I have the gavel. Director Miller?
Actually, I want to wait. You clearly have the resolution,
So
the
noted.
motion? Okay. Would you consider it a friendly amendment to include looking at flexibility to other bargaining units, other work units?
Director O'Halloran?
Yeah, I don't see how putting forward this amendment or this resolution, as I stated it, restricts administration's ability to work with however many bargaining units they see fit. I think that this resolution, the intent of it is to talk about work that does not need to occur in the school. And there are certain activities which need to occur in school, and I recognize that. So I appreciate that you would like to be more inclusive of other bargaining units. I just don't know that this, perhaps, would you be willing to bring a resolution in July about that? Okay.
I'll consider it, sure.
Okay.
No, I'll consider it, but I don't understand why it's exclusionary. Just doesn't make any sense. Why portray exclusion of other work groups when we can consider them? Why would we do that?
Director Woodward?
Yes, I have a question. Motion that was just made, will you make that change the resolution?
Yes, it would be to amend the resolution to remove the confusion about during work time. During the student time, when the students are in the building, I am not suggesting that teachers should willy-nilly walk out of the classroom.
Let me clarify. We have a substitute amendment, okay, to the original motion, to the original resolution, and then we have a friendly amendment that was being proposed and was being discussed, and we went back and forth, but we have not decided on that yet.
Which is decision of Director
Mr.
O'Halloran.
Chair,
Yep.
members of the board, I just want to be sure that I am understanding what the board's intent is relative to the motion that is before you. Please correct Director O'Halloran if I do not have. The motion is to approve the resolution amending the language as follows. Removal of whereas number 5, which reads, whereas teachers are allowed to use some of their time during the workday, such as AMP time and time for student support and tutoring, if during which they do not have any students to work with for non-student work activities as previously described. So that whereas would be removed from consideration. In addition, whereas number 11, which reads, whereas during their workday, teachers face many stressors, relief from which could be afforded by allowing teachers more leeway in the use of their prep time, including the ability to leave campus for short periods of time to run errands or refresh themselves mentally and emotionally. That would also be removed from consideration. In addition, in the first further whereas of the resolved portion of the resolution, in number 1, further resolved that this flexibility include the reasonable ability for teachers to leave their schools during their non-student work time before and or after school. Is that the intent, to approve the resolution as read into the record and amended? Thank you.
To the clerk, let me make sure that I understand this. That is correctly the resolution. But Director Miller was making a friendly amendment to the resolution, and it's up to Director Halloran to decide whether she wants to accept the friendly amendment or not. Okay?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, that would be correct.
I guess I don't understand. It feels like a challenge it. And we're also, to be clear, just proposing that a plan come back in July. So
I'm asking yes or no.
Yeah,
Friendly
Director
amendment or
Halloran,
not.
yes or
That's
no?
all I'm asking.
I'm sorry.
Point of information.
Yes, point of
Just, Director Miller, do you have a specific, I'm just curious, a specific place that would be in a resolution, or what would be the language?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Members of the committee, in reading the further resolve, the amended language to further resolve number 1 would actually add and other bargaining units. That language would be added to the end of that first further resolve. So that would read, further resolve that this flexibility include the reasonable ability for teachers and other bargaining groups to leave their schools during their non-student work time before and or after school.
Director O'Halloran.
I would just like to point out that the whereas we're talking about being an effective teacher requires work that is not limited to instruction of students in the classroom. And how we define non-student work seems so tightly drawn that to throw in other bargaining units just sounds like messy at this point. And I see my colleague, Director Seamson, and co-author would like to speak, so I would ask that she have the opportunity to respond as well.
Director Simpson.
I guess that I mean, that's kind of exactly what I was going to say. I feel like we're taking away the heart and intent of the resolution, which is really to address the stress factors that are currently on the shoulders of our teachers. Not to say that there are many people who are affected by stress that are working in our district, our social workers, our psychologists. I understand that. But I also understand that there are many nuances to the other bargaining units that come into play that I feel like could really bog this down. And I think that this keeps just focusing on the teachers, keeps it very clear, very direct, and would be very easy for administration to come back with in July of, their perspective.
Director
so
O'Hara.
I don't. Madam Secretary, that I would not like to accept the friendly amendment.
So noted.
And can we make a motion to?
The gavel's
sorry.
turned.
It's
Gavel has
already
been
there?
returned.
Okay, never mind then.
So we have a motion on the floor.
Okay. Okay.
Director Miller, can I?
Director Byers.
Yeah, can I comment? I think that this exercise is good to a great degree because it has us talking about a difficult issue. And we are dealing with the details of how to work that out. I'm not totally sold on the idea that it just has to be teachers. I think we need to look at other people too in a particular district. When we're talking about the unification, the unitary idea of a district, of getting everybody involved. But we are asking to this resolution that the superintendent come back to this board. And because we're asking for a plan, this doesn't in any way preclude the superintendent, I think, from being, and please clarify this, I think, from being able to come to us with a plan that incorporates teachers and others, okay? This resolution doesn't say you can't do that, okay? It's simply, there is a stress on a particular group, but it doesn't say you can't do that. When it comes back to us, then as a board, we got to give some more thought to that particular plan and how it works out and how it incorporates some of the thinking that Director Peterson talked about, Director Miller talked about. But overall, I think that the idea here is that I do not ascribe to the notion of them versus us. I think that we have to continue to think that we can bring people together in this district, okay? And that everything that we do to help clarify relationships and work and all of that stuff needs to be seen within the context of this larger idea that we want to build unity, that we want to have everybody in the district support the notion that we can work together and make this work, okay? So I'm hoping that the superintendent will be able to come to us with a plan on how to make this happen, but that if we pass this resolution, this does not preclude the administration from being able to say, as it pertains to these other groups, et cetera, I want to do this, because I think is a logical thing to hope for. When we look at one particular group, we cannot see it in isolation from how it affects others, okay? In a particular school or in the particular district as a whole. So I want to support the idea that we are really putting something forth here to cause us to think deeply about a whole new relationship. And that relationship has to be, first of all, driven by the concern that we have about a unitary system and about all of us working together to make this work. Okay?
Other comments? Director Woodward.
Voted on for them to make.
Madam Clerk? Ask it again, Director
I
Woodward.
was asking, is it necessary for the resolution that they made to be voted on here if they want to make any changes. Their resolution.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this resolution is being forwarded to the board for its consideration. And so right now, it would be up to the board to determine how it wishes to proceed with this item.
Then have to give another two with
Mr. Chair,
Madam
members of
Clerk.
the board, the action that the board takes on the resolution would direct what happens to the resolution next. So if the board were to vote to approve the resolution, the administration then would be required to develop a plan and bring that plan back to the board for consideration in July.
Director Peterson.
I'd like to call the question. I think we've had a fair amount of discussion on this.
Could take a vote, could call for a vote on that. Actually, someone else, you had your hand up, Director, by someone, how you just did it.
We are talking about voting on this substitute.
Correct. Okay, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion, seconded by Director Seamson, to approve Resolution 1920R-003 with removal of whereas number 5, whereas number 11, an amendment to the first further resolved, which that first further resolved in the resolution would read, further resolved, that this flexibility include the reasonable ability for teachers to leave their schools during the non-student work time before and/or after school. On the motion as read. Director
Call the roll.
Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
No.
President Miller.
Abstain.
That's 7 ayes, 1 no, 1 abstention. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item set aside is item number 11 of the Report of Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Action on a request to enter into an intercooperation agreement with the City of Milwaukee for the Truancy Abatement and Burglary Suppression Program, TABS. This item has been set aside for separate consideration at the request of the administration to present a revised draft contract for approval.
Does the administration wish to make comments?
Yes, President Miller and members of the board, we set this item aside to make some corrections to our first item, and the board clerk has copies of that particular item that we want to see at this time. And just there, you will notice, once you receive it, is that the reference to the Summer Bridge program has been removed out of the document. And any information regarding student truancy will be addressed by our school leaders or the school leaders designee. We are prepared to answer any questions that you may have in regards of the corrections that we have made to this item.
Do board members wish to make comment? Or ask questions? Yes, Director Taylor.
Thank you. And just for clarity purposes, we are saying that the TAB officer will not be included in the freshman bridge, right, administration? Chair, sorry.
If you'd answer that, please.
President Miller, members of the board, yes, you're correct.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Director Phillips.
Thank you, President Miller. I just wanted to appreciate the administration for coming back to this item and considering from the different things that we've heard from our community, and I hope that the spirit and the intent of building relationships with students is still part of the TABS program, and figuring out a way for us to do that in a different way will be great.
Any other comments by board members? Not seeing any. Do we need a motion
Mr. Chair,
for
we do need a
adoption of
motion.
this contract?
I move.
A motion.
Yes. So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Director Phillips made the motion, Director Herndon seconded it. Please call the roll.
On Director Phillips's motion to approve the administration's recommendation on item number 11, action on a request to enter into an intergovernmental cooperative agreement with the City of Milwaukee for the TABS program as amended in the attached contract, seconded by Director Herndon. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
President Miller.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what's the next item of business?
The next item set aside is item number 3 of the report of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. Report with possible action regarding the 53206 initiative. This item has been set aside at the request of Director Baez.
Director Baez, do you wish to make a comment?
Yes, I would like to make a comment. I want to make sure that we understand that I am in total support of what the administration is doing in 53206. I had requested, because I was not a member of the PACE committee, that a statement that I sent to Dr. Mann as Secretary and Clerk of this office and to the board be read into the record. And because of some technical problems, we weren't able to do that. And Dr. Mann suggested that I read this statement into the record today, okay? On Tuesday, May 28th, 2019, Dr. Jacqueline Mann, at my request, shared the following statement and the attached article with all board members. And the article was sent to you, and some of you have it. I am now requesting that it be read into the record during discussion of item 3 regarding the MPS administration's report on the 53206 initiative. I'm not talking about the article, so please don't worry. You know, I'm not going to keep you here all night reading the article. I just want to read this statement. During the budget process, I raised the issue with questions and comments on our 53206 projects, okay? I call them projects because they're more than one, really. They're a combination of activities as I see it. I would like to share this with all of you and the record. And so this is my statement. The legacy of intentional governmental racism and segregation affecting the residents of zip code 53206 and adjacent zip codes requires that we treat this project as a major equity issue. Educational outcomes would significantly improve if a major investment of resources is made as a form of racial reparations and which seeks a substantial reduction in all indicators of poverty. This means that families in the area must earn or attain the equivalent of a living wage, and children in our schools must receive the maximum support to address the results of trauma and violence associated with racism and racial segregation. Through its 53206 projects, MPS identifies in this budget what it plans to do, and I thank you for that. I respectfully suggest that this will be an incomplete approach. We need to take the lead by identifying and determining all conditions of inequity affecting children and families in the area, and the expected responsibility of partners such as the city, the county, the state, and other partners, okay? Why can we not explain in the budget, and we passed the budget already, but I think we need to talk about this some more, that improved performance is the joint responsibility of all, okay? And not just the public schools. I suggest that MPS should work in close collaboration with the Office of Accountability and Efficiency to identify the specific contribution of other parties to the eradication of the conditions that breed continued expressions of inequality in this area of the city. Then we should plan to expand this approach to other zip codes. Okay? Also, I wish to share with all the article in the New York Post about New York City's Chancellor of Schools and his efforts to suppress racism among administrators and others. The article is not supportive of Dr. Carranza's efforts to eradicate racism, because that came from the New York Post, and we know basically that they are somewhat of a conservative output that they do. But it is important to us because he is doing something about it. I hope that we revisit this issue very soon. It is my intent in reading this into the record that we keep these issues alive, that we continue to think of the situation in 53206 as not in isolation from what other partners, the city, the county, the state need to do, and that we take the lead in sort of like identifying what it is that they need to do, so that when we hear reports on this issue, when we consider issues regarding 53206, we keep that perspective in mind, and that's my purpose in reading this into the record. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Comments by board members? Not seeing any. Next item, please.
Of regular business would be our report of the board's delegates. Item 1 is the reports of the board's delegate to the District Advisory Council.
Director Phillips?
That report is before you, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that of the report of the board's delegate to the Head Start Policy Council.
And that report is before you. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right. Madam Secretary, what's the next item of regular business?
The next item of regular business would be the report of the president of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Okay, that report is included, and give me a call if you have any questions. Madam Secretary, are there any items of new business for referral?
Mr. Chair, we have no items of new business.
Are there any communications for referral to committee?
There are no communications for referral.
Are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have one resolution, which is attached for referral to committee, Resolution 1920R-007 by Director Simpson regarding the creation of a defined contribution retirement health benefit.
This resolution will be referred to the Committee of Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. President, we are back to the item that was referred until the end of the agenda, and that would be the item that is the monthly report from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency.
So we're going into closed session on that. Can we retire from closed session on that item?
Mr. President, at this point, you would be considering action on a request to retire to executive session in order to confer with legal counsel regarding litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved. The board can then either come back out and take action or retire from executive session.
Thank you.
You've been noticed to go into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute, Section 19.85, Parent G, to confer with legal counsel regarding who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved.
So we need to take a vote. We did not vote on this. Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, we do need a motion.
Oh.
I move that we go into executive session.
Okay, can you get a second?
Second.
All right, Director Baez, motion, Director Simpson seconded it.
On the motion to retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.85, Parent G, by Director Baez, seconded by Director Simpson. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor. Director Woodward. President Miller.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
All right, Madam Secretary, please note the time we're going in and note the time that if we do retire from executive session, what that time would be. Unless we come out here and you'll note it from this position. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Is that polite?
Okay, so it's you're inclusive. We got here. That's okay. All right. I knew it was one. I knew it was one. Okay, no.
We're going on air, right? Sure. It's 1 minute after 10, Director Herndon. We didn't make. We've done it. This meeting of the Board of School Directors will come to order. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Chair, we went into executive session, consider an item submitted by the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. And at this point, the item is, what is the pleasure of?
Director Herndon.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the reorganizational structure of the Office of Accountability and Efficiency with the appointment of Matthew Chason as the Senior Director of the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, and direct that the Senior Director move forward with executing the reorganizational structure, inclusive of the updated job descriptions within the budget allocation and authority for fiscal year 20.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Not seeing any. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On the motion as read by Director Herndon, seconded by Director Wood. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
President Miller.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
Not seeing any further items, this meeting is adjourned.